Welcome back to the channel, guys. It is season 3. Whew. And we are taking it up a notch because in season 3 we are going really technical. So today we are preparing tender and juicy, falling off the bone short rib. Yes, beef short ribs. It doesn't get better than this in episode 1. So how do you cook beef short ribs? Well, there is certain flavors and a technique that you need to apply when cooking meat with a lot of collagen. So when cooking meat with high collagen, you have to cook it for a long period of time on a low heat. This means you can throw it in the oven or in a fire pit for at least 3 to 4 hours. So how do we know what type of meat has high collagen? Well, it's very simple. Any type of animal that has moving parts like your legs, the butt and shoulders has a high amount of collagen because of that connective tissue which is formed by the muscle tissue. And in order to break down that muscle fibers, you have to cook it for a period of time. So what pieces of meat out there has high collagen? Well, leg of lamb, short rib, oxtail, chicken thighs, all these types of meat can be braised over a long period of time. When cooking this tougher meat, you have to break down the collagen into gelatin, which then becomes tender and juicy, falling off the bone, as you probably know it. So the technique today is really braising that short rib over 4 hours in an oven. But before we do that, we need some flavor profile. So firstly, what is braising? Braising is cooking any type of meat in a pot for a long period of time. Now, if you watch my previous videos, I spoke about cast iron skillets, which actually retains heat, which becomes the perfect braising tool. So here I have a cast iron pot, which is called a Dutch oven. This goes back hundreds of years ago, so it's very popular and is one of the best things to use in braising meat. If you do not own a Dutch oven, don't stress. You can get away with a roasting tray, but you need to make sure that you cover the top of the roasting tray with at least 2 layers of foil. The whole technique behind braising is letting that steam inside circulate through the liquid that we place in that pot, so that liquid actually cooks that meat through. The only problem with a roasting tray in foil is when you have to maybe add in some potatoes or tomatoes at a later stage, or any type of vegetables that you want. You will have to remove the foil, add in those extra stuff, and then making sure that you seal the foil again. So it's not the most efficient way of braising. I mean, these Dutch ovens are really expensive, so if you don't stress, use a roasting tray. So looking at the flavor profile, there's a few things you need to consider. Firstly, you need to create a liquid base of flavor in that pot to actually cook down that short rib. Here we have a matinon, which is very similar to a mirepoix. The only difference with a mirepoix is that the vegetable and spices are only used to flavor that liquid. Matinon is where we use the vegetables as a flavor profile in the bottom of that pan, and you are able to eat that together with your dish or use as a garnish. So the matinon that I have here is onion, celery, carrots, some Italian parsley, garlic, thyme and some bay leaves. This is of course separate to the spices that I'm gonna add in. There is that foundation, and that is that matinon in that pan. It starts right here. So enough chit chat, let's get cooking. First things first, turn up the heat on the pan. High heat. Let this pan get nice and hot. Now I have here some short ribs. The only thing I've done here was added some salt around half an hour ago. Kind of a dry brine just to bring out that water. These babies are going to be so juicy, so tender, and it's going to fall off the bone. I mean, it's going to be too nice. If you have a good look at your short rib, you will notice that there are layers of meat and there's always a bone at the bottom. So keep the bone on. This creates a lot of flavor in that pan. Leave it as is. You can get this in almost any store or from your local butcher. So while my pan is getting nice and hot, I want to slightly season this meat again with salt and pepper, just to give it extra seasoning. Good amount of kosher salt, some black pepper. Get that seasoning all over that meat. To get this extra crispy in that pan, I'm going to throw in some all-purpose flour just to get a little bit of that flavor. I mean, it just takes it to a whole nother level. Not too much, just enough to coat the meat. Make sure the flour is all over. It is now going to hit that pan at a high heat to get a nice browning, because that browning will actually create a fond at the bottom of that pan, which will be the base for that flavor of that liquid. So let's add in that canola oil. I'm adding in canola oil because it's a neutral oil with a high smoking point. You don't want to use extra virgin olive oil in here. You will burn that oil. Anything that needs to be seared at high heat, use a high smoking oil like grapeseed oil, vegetable oil or canola oil. Let's get these babies in. So I'm not putting the short rib all in at once. I want some space in there to work with. Man, it is smelling so good up in here. Cannot wait. So I will also be making a polenta. Polenta is a very staple grain in northern Italy. I mean, this goes back hundreds of years ago. It is nice and creamy. The thickness of that polenta goes so well with that sauce of that short rib. It is, oh my god. I mean, season 3 episode 1, we are taking it up a notch. So as you can see, we're getting some nice browning on that short rib. I mean, it is looking absolutely beautiful. Make sure you get both sides of that meat nice and brown. You can now remove the first batch of that short rib. The short rib is seared on all sides, especially that fat. No need to worry about that bone side. So second batch going in. So let's observe here very quickly. I mean, this short rib smells good, it's going to even taste good, but not at this moment. I can actually feel how tough this meat is, which means that collagen is still in there and we need to break down that collagen. And this can only happen over a long period of time, low and slow. The collagen or the connective tissue normally breaks down around 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I normally braise for around 4 hours, depends on your oven as well. To be really safe, you can use a thermometer or just keep the meat in the oven for around 4 hours. So what we have here, people, is fond. I mean, look at this. This is flavor. This is going to be the base to what we're going to do next. So all I'm going to do is add in some more canola oil. Okay, turn on the heat. Get that heat down to a medium. Just take your wooden spoon, move all of that fond around. Let's get started with the matinon. First things first, onions. Get some nice browning on that onions. Okay, let it absorb all of that fond at the bottom of that pan. Next, throw in your celery and carrots. As you can see, the celery is cut to nice bite sizes because we're going to eat this later, as well as the carrots. I mean, if you're making a mirepoix, you will make this much smaller because you're not going to eat this afterwards. So matinon is the way to go. As you can see, the bottom of the pan is getting nice and clean. This is because the carrot, celery and onions are now cleaning up the bottom. Is now absorbing all of that fond, becoming more flavorful, which is going to be perfect for the stock later. Next we're going to throw in some garlic. Garlic in, mix that garlic in. Man, it smells so good. Just want to close the lid. There's a little bit of steam inside there. I mean, I'm not going to cook down those carrots or celery. It's going to cook over the next 4 hours. But just to build up more flavor, get those flavors trapped in there with that garlic, with that onions. It's going to be so good. So next is tomato paste. Tomato paste creates this nice foundation. I mean, we have our matinon in there. Now we want to add in some tomato paste just to clean that pan, get all that flavor out, absorbed into those vegetables, and you are done with step 1. So add in some tomato paste. And then make sure you get that tomato paste cooked in. Once it gets nice and hot, then you can start mixing. Close this up for about 2 minutes. So I got the matinon and I have the tomato paste cleaning that bottom of the pan. The flavor is now building up slowly. Next we are going to deglaze with some beautiful dry red wine. Any type of dry red wine, doesn't need to be cheap, doesn't need to be expensive, whatever you drink at home. Let's deglaze. So dropping some red wine. It's very important to burn the alcohol out before you add in your stock. So the reason we deglaze a pan is to get all of that flavor out. We've added that tomato paste that cleans that bottom, but the deglazing of that red wine, the acidity from that wine breaks down all those enzymes at the bottom, making sure that every part of that fond is absorbed by those vegetables. Give it about 5 minutes to burn out all of that alcohol, and then we'll throw in our short ribs back into that pan. So the alcohol has been reduced quite a bit. Now it's time to add in some extra flavor in that pan. So first thing, salt. Throw in some kosher salt, some black pepper. Now I have a beautiful spice blend that I made earlier on. There I have some caraway seeds, some fennel seeds, and some sweet basil. Just grind it up a bit. Do not make it too fine. I want it a little bit coarse, as you can see, and it smells absolutely good. So throw that in. Next I want to grab some green cardamom. Okay, just a few. These are like my favorite firecrackers. Give it a small smash, or use your pestle and mortar and just add it in. some star anise. This pot becomes so flavorful in the end, it is unbelievable. And some dried bay leaves. As you can see, that wine completely reduced. You don't even see it anymore because those vegetables are bursting with flavor, absorbed all of that liquid. Oh my god. Time to add in the short rib. All I want to do is place that short rib on top of those vegetables so it becomes the kind of foundation to allow that flavorful stock to go underneath the meat and also braise it from that bottom, which becomes adding our short rib back. Okay, let's place it on the top. Now it's time to add in the stock. Yeah, I have some beef stock. You can use vegetable stock, chicken stock, doesn't really matter. I'm making beef short ribs, so I'm going with beef stock. This is around 6 cups of stock. Just want the short rib to be covered just like that. Okay, this is going to reduce later on. So 6 cups of stock is in there, and now that stock will become even more flavorful with those vegetables and spices at the bottom. So crank up the heat, let this come to a boil. It's so important to get this up to a boil before putting it into the oven in order to accelerate the process of braising. And to end off the herbs, I'm going to throw in some thyme. This is fresh thyme that I've cut up. Thyme in, some finely chopped Italian parsley. It's going to be... So when braising, you can also include something called a bouquet garni. It's basically a food or wax cloth or a type of leaf that holds in herbs and spices. These are the herbs and spices that you will not eat at the end of your dish because it has stems, it has seeds, it has cloves. So when you're dishing out that short rib, you don't want the star anise, that bay leaf all going into your final dish, especially when you plate in. So a bouquet garni is very common. All you need to do is get that waxy cloth, throw in the herbs and spices, get a string or twine and just wrap that in and throw it in the corner of that pot, and that will still infuse the entire stock over the next 4 hours. Since I do not have any waxy cloth or twine at home, I basically placed it in that pot completely submerged, which means when I'm dishing out, I have to individually pick the short rib up and kind of make sure that I do not add in the bay leaf and the star anise in my final dish. We only use that for flavor. So this is going to go into the oven for around 4 hours at 150 degrees Celsius. Around 2 hours within that braising process, I am going to throw in a can of tomatoes. This is diced tomatoes just to thicken up and get a nice tomato base in that short rib. You are going to have the most beautiful short rib falling off the bone with some nice tomatoes. As you can see, the stock has now come up to a boil. It has a good simmer, which means it is now ready to go into the oven. So let's throw on the lid and get this baby in the oven. 4 hours, 150 degrees Celsius. I will also be making this lovely polenta in the last hour, so it will be ready once I plate that short rib over the beautiful polenta. It's going to be too nice.
One eternity later.
Okay, we have 1 hour left for that short rib to come out nice and juicy. There's nothing better than meat falling off that bone, melting in your mouth. I mean, that is one of a kind, and you can only get it if you have the patience for cooking a piece of meat for 4 hours. It's a Friday, having a good drink of gin infused with thyme. It is unbelievable, so smooth. Man. Anyways, let's start that polenta. So, as I mentioned, polenta is a staple in northern Italy. This goes back around 1500 AD. This has been the grain for people who could not afford to eat like the king or the emperor of Rome. Polenta was a staple in every household in Italy. Polenta today is one of the best types of grains that you can eat, especially when coupled with short rib, oxtail, and leg of lamb. I mean, it just goes so well. And you need something to break the richness of that buttery meat. So let's make polenta. First things first, turn on the heat. Now, people are scared of making polenta because there's so many techniques. I'm going to show you an easy technique that you can do at home. Don't worry, I got you. How do you say in French? J'ai to you, so don't stress. Okay, so pan is on, got some high heat in here. Now I want to pour in some stock. This is beef stock. You can use chicken stock, you can use vegetable stock, you can even use water. Stock just gives it a different depth of flavor. So here I have around 5 to 6 cups of stock. I'm just going to put in 5 cups. Now I want to put in my polenta. It's quite simple. The ratio is 1 cup of polenta to around 5 cups of water. Some people says 4, some people says 5. I mean, give or take, I would use 5 cups. Let's throw in a cup of polenta. Beautiful. Throw this on a bowl. 1 cup serves around 4 people. That's what they say. I am like 3 people myself, so this is more than enough between myself and the missus. Now the technique here is really simple. All you need to do is let that stock or water come to a boil, let it simmer, and then slowly or gradually add in your polenta while stirring. Let's add in the polenta. Keep stirring as you add in so you can prevent any lumps. Take your time. As you can see, it looks beautiful. Beautiful. I mean, it's starting to thicken. Just keep whisking. I mean, you don't have to stand here all the time. That initial stirring is so important. You don't want to have any lumps in there. Now the heat is down to a medium. I mean, you're gonna treat polenta like you're cooking rice, so don't rush. Take it easy. Add in a little bit more stock. I mean, the first time I made polenta, I made it with water and it tastes still really good. I mean, the flavor is coming from that meat, right? So that meat with that sauce, that is where the flavor is. So basic seasoning here, salt. You can add in some pepper if you want. But salt, parmesan is the most common ingredients used in polenta. Add in more stock. Stir away. Kosher salt. You need to season your polenta. Good amount of salt. Just keep stirring. Just keep adding stock. I mean, it is looking really good. Have a good sip of gin. Woo, too nice. A little bit more stock. I am now going to stir until this thing thickens up. Then I'm going to throw the lid on top of this and let it sit on that heat for about 15 minutes. I want to come back around every 5 minutes, give it a good stir so you do not have any lumps. I dropped the heat down to low. Now I'm going to throw on the lid and just let that sit there for 15 minutes. In the meantime, have a break with some gin. Woo, this is good. I mean, gin infused with thyme, yes. I mean, when you're eating short rib and polenta, you would want to have a nice glass of red wine. That is what I have planned later. Good glass red wine, juicy, tender, meat dropping off the bone, short rib, served on top of beautiful polenta. It is going to be so good, and the missus loves this. So 5 minutes in, give it a good stir. And now time for the wooden spoon. Italians love using the wooden spoon when it comes to polenta. Something about a wooden spoon and polenta grains goes really well. I mean, if you do not have a wooden spoon, then use a normal spoon. So the polenta should be ready any minute now. All I need to do is add in some butter. Good number of butter goes in. Some Parmigiano Reggiano Parmesan. Nice thing with Parmesan is because it's so salty, it gives the polenta a little bit more seasoning. Give it a stir. Get that butter, that Parmesan nicely infused. Oh my. And there we have it. Beautiful polenta. Going to be so creamy with that Parmesan and butter. Oh my god. This forms that bed for that short rib and really goes so well together. Make sure there's enough salt in here. Al dente. Cover it up with a lid and let that rest for a few minutes. It's time to get that short rib. 4 hours later, let's see what we have. So I've just taken it out of the oven. 4 hours later, really low and slow. So let's have a look. Oh man, it smells so good. Damn it. Let's plate this baby. I mean, have a look here. This looks so good. By adding the tomatoes in after 2 hours of cooking, really makes it flavorful. If I did not add in the tomatoes, it would have reduced quite a bit, not leaving much sauce. So that tomato really helps. Let's have a taste, shall we? Bon appetit. Oh my god. I have to do this one more time. I mean, I'm putting my daddy's spoon in there, but it's just me and the missus, so she needs to understand. This is so tasty. The sauce is so flavorful. Too nice. Nice and creamy. Let's add in that short rib and some of the juices. So I just want to show you this piece of short rib right here. So, oh my god. This makes me so happy. I mean, look at that. Look at that, people. Breaking down with my spoon, almost like mash. It just melts in your mouth. That is what I call 4 hours of cooking for something so amazing. And you can make it at home too. I mean, it is so basic. OMG, this is one of a kind. I mean, let's taste this with that polenta. Falling off the bone, that's what we want. Some of that lovely polenta. Got some carrots here. This is what's nice with that matinon. Fresh parsley. Bon appetit again. This is so good. I cannot even explain how tasty this is right now. My goodness. The missus is going to be so happy with this. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well as that notification bell. On the next episode, I have a surprise for you. So hit the notification bell and I will see you on the next one.